Hello boys and girls and welcome back to Planet 40k, the Necron channel. Now in today's video we're going to be going through another datasheet, doing a bit of a review again. And this time it's going to be the LOKHUST Heavy Destroyers. Now this was requested by one of our members, which is Jorg Hader. So shout out to you. And that was a request from you today, so we're going to be doing that for you, Jorg. And yeah, let's get on with the LOKHUST Heavy Destroyers. Right, so let's begin with, of course, the rear side of the data card. Now these models previously were 50 points a model in 9th edition. They are now 45 points a model. So when you previously were buying 3 of them, it was 150 points. Now buying 3 of them is 135 points. So you are saving on 15 points there. You know, every little helps, I suppose. As for the unit composition, you're getting between 1 and 3, as we've just mentioned. Every model is equipped with a Gauss Destructor and a close combat weapon, and you can swap out the Gauss Destructor with an Emetic Exterminator. So that's the 2 weapon choices for the LOKHUST Heavy Destroyers. And before we flip over the card, let's go through those keywords. There is a slight change to the keywords here. They are now mounted. They are not infantry anymore, they are mounted. So that potentially could interact with different things that relate to infantry. But they do have the fly keyword, although the fly keyword has been severely nerfed in this edition because you've got to measure diagonally and you don't get the unlimited vertical distance anymore. But let's flip that card over and let's check out the main juicy stuff. The movement is now 7 inches, it previously was 8 inch. Toughness is 6, previously was 5, so they've got tougher. Might have lost an inch, but you've got a tougher, so that's pretty decent. I mean, toughness 6 is quite difficult to break through unless you're starting to put in quite a lot of decent weapons. You can't be firing that, you know, using bolt guns, for example. That's not going to cut it. You can do it, but it's not going to do it efficiently. Armor save is a 3+, they've got 4 wounds, that's as it was. Leadership is 7+, and the objective control is 2. So 2 per man, that's okay, that's okay. I mean, these guys will likely be going in our backlines anyway, so maybe they will be on an objective, so having 2 does benefit them slightly. As for the range weaponry for the LOKHUST Heavy Destroyers, you've got the 2 options here. Let's go through them in order of what they are on the profile, just so it's easy for us to manage. Emetic Exterminator is the first one to begin. So it has got the heavy keyword, rapid fire 6, sustained hits 1. So what is rapid fire 6 in case you don't know? If you are within half range, which will be 18 inches, you get an additional 6 shots. So you'll be having a total of 12 shots within half range. Also sustained hits 1, so every critical hit, so that in a natural state that will be a 6 to hit, will get you an additional hit. So if you've got 12 shots on average per LOKHUST Heavy Destroyer at half range, on average 2 of them should be critical hits. So 2 of them, you should be basically getting 2 more hits there. So 36 inch range as it was, 6 attacks, Ballistic Skill 3+, Strength is 6, it used to be 7, it is now 6. I don't actually mind that, because we were never really targeting light vehicles with this anyway. It felt like we were almost paying attacks to get Strength 7 when we didn't really need it. If you're going up against Toughness 3, you only need a 6 to be double it anyway. And of course, I mean the only downside to this, I suppose, if you're going up against Toughness 6, units such as LOKHUST Heavy Destroyers, in fact, they're a good example. You would be wounding them on the 4+, but there's not that many in comparison to Toughness 5, Toughness 4 and Toughness 3. So I'm okay with that, even though it's enough. The AP is still -1 and it's still 1 damage. Now something to note about these weapons, both of them in fact, previously we had the move and shoot ability with heavy. That's now no longer a thing because heavy is completely different, of course. If you're staying stationary, you're getting a +1 to the hit roll. So that kind of counteracts our command protocols from our detachment rule, because if we've got a character leading the unit, we get a +1 to the hit roll, and you can't go more than +1 or -1 in terms of modifying the dice roll. So therefore, if you've already got heavy, you don't need a leader unless you want to move. But yeah, I like the fact that they've got the rapid fire 6 and sustain hits 1. I mean, it kind of makes up for the fact that we've also lost the blast ability on this weapon as well. But yeah, this weapon is pretty useful against Toughness 3 in particular. 1 wound models with a low toughness, Toughness 3 as we mentioned. Low armor save as well, of course, because we've only got -1 AP here. We've got loads of shots, so gaunts, guardians, that kind of thing. That is the target. So if you know you're going up against those factions with lots of hordes, that's the kind of weapon you should be selecting. Now it's also worth mentioning the ability now. We normally would do this after the weapons, but the ability relates to the weapons. So optimized for slaughter, each time a model in this unit makes an attack with the Exterminator against infantry, re-roll wound rolls of a 1. Very important there. So not only will we potentially be hitting on a 2+ if we stay stationary, We're likely going to be wounding on a 2+ against toughness 3, and we're re-rolling 1s as well. So against toughness 3 in particular, that is a prime target. Now let's move on to the second weapon, which is my preferred weapon, although the Exterminator isn't as bad as it used to be. It used to be absolute garbage in knife. I think it's actually pretty decent now from what we've just seen. But let's move on to the Destructor. This has got the heavy weapon and it's lethal hits. So heavy, again, if you stay stationary, +1 to the hit roll. Again, you might not need characters to do that anymore, but if you do want to move, maybe you do want to think about a character. Lethal hits means if you get a critical hit to the hit roll, which would be a 6, you don't need to roll to wound, you just automatically get past that dice. Your opponent still gets the armor save, and so on. Now, we've got a 48-inch range on this thing. I'm pretty sure it used to be 36, yes it did. So we've got a little bit of better range on there, which I'm quite happy with because I keep these guys back as far as possible. Now, they're only 1 shot apiece, so a max unit of 3 is only 3 shots. That's when you've got this much strength in a weapon, we can't expect too many shots. Swings and roundabouts with how reliable and how janky it is, because sometimes you get the hit, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you've got to spend CP to do them again, and then sometimes you come up against in-one save, so you win some, you lose some with that. Ability skill is 3+, strength is now 14, it used to be strength 10, so a massive increase in the strength. Even a monolith is getting wounded on a 4+, pretty nice. -4 AP is all you need really, and the damage, I'm actually happy with this, it's damage 6. Now we used to have 3d3. Now 3d3 looks really scary. When you tell your opponent when they're playing Necrons for the first time, you say I've got 3d3 damage, they absolutely crap themselves. They're like, what? 3d3? But the average of that is just 6 at the end of the day. It's 2, 2, 2 and you get the 6. I'm quite happy that it is a flat 6 because there were situations where you just roll really poorly, triple 1, and you just think, wow, I've gone through the hit roll, the wound roll, gone through your in-bun save, and all I've done is 3 damage. Yes, I can re-roll it, but I've got no CP, Those kind of situations happen, but now you've got a flat 6 per shot that goes through an armor save. I'm okay with that, I like that. Yes, we've lost the potential of getting 9, but that's okay, 6 is decent, it's decent. Now we need to go back into the ability again because the second part of that ability related to the Lokhust Destructor. So if you're targeting monsters or vehicles, you get to re-roll wound rolls of A1. Very similar to the previous part when you're going up against infantry, but this time it is monsters and vehicles. Again, that is the prime target for these, so we should talk about that really. You don't want to be firing this at a Gaunt, do you? You don't want to be firing this at an Orc Boy unit, you want to be firing this at the big stuff, the Knights, Leman Russes, whatever you can in terms of vehicles and monsters, Bloodthirsters. This is the target for this weapon, so you're going to be re-rolling wound rolls of a 1 as well against those said targets. Now they also come with a close combat weapon. Yeah, it's 2 attacks, weapon skill 3+, strength 4, no AP, 1 damage. It's pretty much just standard. It's just improvised weaponry at this point, isn't it? I'm not going to talk too much about that. Don't get them in engagement range. If you can get out of engagement range, do so. There is absolutely no point sitting there wasting turns. Now we did mention that you could opt to put a character to lead the unit for command protocols. You don't always need it, but if you do move, of course you're going to not have the heavy keyword unlocked for the weapon, so therefore you still want the +1 to the hit roll, right? So therefore you want to have a character leading the unit maybe. The only one that can naturally lead this unit is the Lokhust Lord, and there are 2 parts of his datasheet that relate to the Lokhust Heavy Destroyers. The first is the Destroyer Cult ability, so critical hits are unlocked on a 5+ rather than a 6+, so that will interact with Sustain Hits 1 ability from the Exterminator, or the Lethal Hits ability from the Destructor. Now with the Destructor, I don't think you need it with Strength 14. I mean, yes, you can just, you might still miss, maybe you've got CP to re-roll stuff. I don't think it's as needed. With the Sustain Hits 1 ability, potentially that could be a really good combination though. He also comes with the Resurrection Orb, so in your opponent's command phase you could be using your reanimation protocols, and we all know how good that is this edition. Now also worth noting that if you do have a leader leading the unit, it also benefits not just for command protocols, it's also the stratagems as well. So I want to go through them before talking about the enhancement bit, so we know where that's going, right? So let's talk about, I think I've got 4 or 5 stratagems that I wanted to mention that will relate to the Lokhust Heavy Destroyers. The first is the protocol of Conquering Tyrant for 1 command point done in your shooting phase. Effectively, if you are firing at half range, so 18-inch range for the Exterminator, 24-inch range for the Lokhust Destructor, you can re-roll the wound rolls, not just wound rolls of a 1, you just re-roll all of them. Now you might be wounding on like a 2 anyway, so it might be completely redundant, but if you're not, it will help. And if you've got a character leading the unit, the Lokhust Lord as an example, you can do it at the full range rather than half range. So it's only 1 CP, sometimes it's worth looking at the maths of that before you actually start firing. The second one, which is probably one of our best stratagems we've got for a shooter unit, which is the Protocol of Vengeful Stars. I rate this higher than Overwatch by a long way. So this is done in your opponent's shooting phase this time, not yours, your opponent's. Once we've lost one of our models from our unit, so 1 of 3 have gone, we can shoot as if it was our shooting phase, but we have to shoot at the unit that actually attacked us in the first place. Now the likelihood is we'll be in range and we will have visibility because they've shot us in the first place. And we're not doing it on Overwatch, so we're not needing 6s to hit, it's just natural, 3+, or in fact it'll be a 2+ if we are heavy. Now if you've got the Lokhust Lord leading this unit, then they also get the ignores cover ability. Sometimes that's okay, sometimes not. I mean, for the Exterminator, I think it makes a bit of a difference because we've only got -1. We don't want to give them a cover save. But for the Destructor, we've already got -4. Yeah, it does help sometimes, but it's not critical. It's not critical. The third one on my list is Protocol of Sunstorm. In our movement phase, we select a Necrons unit and effectively give them the Assault ability. So that means that we will be able to move, advance, and still fire as normal. Now, again, we're going to lose the heavy keyword for that moment in time because we're not going to get the +1 to the hit roll anymore. But if we do have a leader in the unit, it doesn't matter, right? We're still getting command protocols, which is a +1 to the hit roll for the unit. And if their character is in that unit, in fact, we get to re-roll that advance roll. So that could get them out of a situation where they're about to get charged in your opponent's next turn. Maybe you want to just get them into a better firing lane, or just get them onto an objective that's important for the game. Quite a decent one, that one. Protocol of Undying Legions is the 4th one from the Necron index. This is after your opponent's shooting phase or fight phase, or any of the fight phases in fact, could be yours as well. Once you've lost one of your models, you can effectively trigger reanimation protocols. Again, we know how good reanimation protocols is. Now before getting into some more synergy, I wanted to mention the Fire Overwatch stratagem. It's an obvious one, but I just want to throw it in here. You want to be making use of this. They don't need to be the target of the charge, but it can even be done in your opponent's movement phase. It doesn't have to be just the charge phase, but you can only do it once per turn. And effectively, you're just going to do Overwatch. That's probably better on the Exterminator weapon rather than the Destructor weapon. Right, let's get back into the enhancements and talk about that again for the millionth time. But the Sovereign Coronal Aura, which is an enhancement, you can stick this on a character that isn't effectively in the unit, so it doesn't have to be a Lokhust Lord. So Necron units within 6 inches of the bearer count as being led by a Necron's character. Then designers know, and I'm going to repeat this again because I'm still getting comments, I can't believe I'm still getting the comments. This means the unit that is within range of this aura ability will benefit from the command protocol's ability and will count as having a character for the purposes of the Awakened Dynasty stratagems. So they count as being led by a character, the character is not leading them. The enhancement is simply just unlocking the buffs and bonuses for them to be led by a character. For the command protocols and the stratagems. I hope I don't have to keep saying this again and again and again, but I'm sure somebody will comment saying that you get the Technomancer's 5+ for no pain save. Even though they're not leading the unit, but they are 6 inches away with the Sovereign Coronal, you can't do it right now. Let's move on. Right, triggering. Right, onto the command barge. We have... Why am I talking about the command barge? I'm flustered now. Right, what you would do with the command barge, of course, you would use that Sovereign Coronal enhancement. I think that's one of the best options for this enhancement with the Lokhust Heavy Destroyers. Not only for increasing your objective control by 1 to put them on 3, also for the Resurrection Orb. And he's just a pretty decent all-round kind of character that can buff a unit. But he's also going to provide the command protocols as we've just spoken about, so +1 to the hit roll, even if they move, and the stratagems get slightly better as well. We can't go through a video without mentioning the Reanimator. If you're triggering reanimation protocols, D3 extra on the reanimation, we love that. And I wanted to give a little mention to the Triarch Stalker. Now I know it was pretty crap in the last edition. I liked it personally, but overall it's pretty bad unless the Silent King was with him. This edition I think it's a little bit worse, but I want to go through it because it has a shooting ability. Targeting relay, in your shooting phase, each time this model selects to shoot, after you resolve the attacks, select an enemy unit that was hit by one of these attacks, and then until the end of the phase, that unit cannot benefit from cover. So you can remove cover from the unit, then get your Lokhust Heavy Destroyers with the Exterminators with the sustained hits 1, -1 AP, and then get them to fire at this big blow of Orc Boys, for example. Maybe that's a little bit of synergy, a bit of combination. We'll have to see. Right, let's move on to, well, in fact, no, we're jumping the gun here. We need to talk about the battlefield role before we get onto the pros and cons. And for some reason, I have not prepped that in my notes, so we're going to have to go and wing it. Lokhust Heavy Destroyers, what are we using them for? They're staying in our home objective areas. They want to be in our deployment area, of course. They don't need to go far. The only reason they need to move is if you've got opponents coming in from deep strike, making a charge move. We need to escape. We need to get out, dodge. We don't want to get charged. As soon as they are in engagement range, they are virtually useless. They can't fire into engagement range, and they are literally tied in combat against a unit that is very likely going to be good at fighting in melee. So that's not where they want to be. So you want to be making maximum use of the fly keyword, even though it is worse than it was in 9th. Get on top of areas that standard infantry will struggle to get to, on top of towers, ruins, hills, places that your opponent will struggle to get to without the fly keyword, and force them to have to almost fire at us rather than get into combat with us. That's the first thing. Second of all, they need to be on an objective. If you're going to have some units back, these are one of those units that will stay back on an objective control 2, potentially boost it to 3 with the command barge. They're holding your home ground, and if you've got any secondaries that relate to holding ground in your own area, that's going to benefit as well. They don't need to go far. Now, unfortunately, you've not got things such as the Veil of Darkness relic where you can, well, in fact you could. Technically you could put it on the Lokhust Lord, and as soon as they get into bother you can zip them off into some other location. I think it's a bit of a waste of a Veil, but in the smaller games where you want to use them, I suppose, but I think there's better enhancements, so I wouldn't bother. Right, let's move on to the pros and cons for the Lokhust Heavy Destroyers, starting with optional weapons. The fact that they've got the option pre-game, or not pre-game, I've said that in the last video, so not pre-game. When you're building your list, you're choosing the anti-infantry weapon or the anti-monster and vehicle weapon. Depending on the rest of your list, if you've got a couple of Doomsday Arcs, you're not going to need them. So maybe you want to go with them with the Exterminators, or just completely take them out of your list. Pro number 2, they've now got toughness 6, which makes them a lot more difficult to get rid of unless your opponent designates heavier weapons into them. That's good. They're a cheap anti-tank for only 45 points for damage 6 weapons, and there's going to be 3 in the unit for 135 points. I think that's pretty cheap. Heavy now means we don't necessarily need a Lokhust Lord in the unit. If we stay stationary and plan to stay stationary, we're already getting the +1, so we don't need to pay the tax on the Lokhust Lord for the unit. However, at the same time, it is also a pro to have the Lokhust Lord in, because he has his own benefits such as the Resurrection Orb and critical hits on a 5+. Rerolls to the wound rolls come naturally for the unit, which is nice, and it goes hand in hand with the weaponry. If you've got the Exterminator, it works on infantry, and if you've got the Destructor, it works on monsters and vehicles. That works hand in hand, nice. Flat 6 damage with the Destructor, I like that. 3d3 was good, but I like to know exactly where I stand with my damage. I'm a bit of an averages kind of person, maths person, so I'd rather just know before I fire. And the Exterminator is actually okay now. I quite like it. As for the cons, slightly slower than 9th edition, only by an inch. Every inch helps. And move and fire has now gone in terms of heavy. In the old edition, no infantry units could move and fire heavy without penalties. We could without the penalty, but now it is just universal that heavy is something completely different. So we've kind of lost that ability, but hey, it's okay. And finally, the Doomsday Arc is now arguably better. Now, I've not done the Doomsday Arc review yet. I personally think from my experience so far for 10th edition, I think the Doomsday Arc is better. There's lots of pros and cons to having the Doomsday Arc, but we'll get onto that in another video. So it's that time in the video where we talk about the Planet 40k rating for the Lokhust Heavy Destroyers. And for me, they're still a good unit. I already said just a moment ago that I think the Doomsday Arcs are better. So they're not like a 5-star unit anymore like they used to be, because there are better options, or a better option. But they are still a very good and very cheap option. So for me today, I'm going to go with the Planet 40k rating of 4 stars. So guys, you'll have to drop down in the comments below what you would rate the Lokhust Heavy Destroyers and why. Thank you all for watching, guys. See you in the next one.